After an argument, my son left me at a bus stop with no money. A blind gentleman whispered, "Pretend you're my wife. My driver is coming. Your son will regret leaving you." The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as I watched Daniel's car disappear around the corner, the screech of tires on asphalt, a final punctuation to our argument. At 67, I never imagined I'd be standing abandoned at a bus stop, my own son driving away in anger. "I'm not a child, Daniel," I had told him, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain calm. "I don't need you arranging my life as if I'm incompetent." His response had been predictably dismissive. "Mom, you're being unreasonable. That senior living facility is perfect. They have activities, medical staff, everything you need. Everything except my independence," I'd countered. That's when he'd pulled over abruptly. "Fine. If you're so independent, find your own way home." Maybe that will make you realize you need help. Only after his car disappeared did I discover my predicament. My purse, containing my wallet and bus pass, sat on my kitchen counter where I'd left it in our rush to leave. My cell phone, which I'd grabbed at the last minute, showed just 3% battery remaining. I felt a flush of humiliation rise to my cheeks as I stood at the bus stop, a woman of my age with no way to get home. 5 years a widow, 30 years a teacher of literature, and now reduced to this, stranded by my only child who couldn't understand that living in that antiseptic prison of a retirement community would kill me faster than any physical ailment. The bus stop bench offered little comfort to my arthritic hip as I contemplated my options. I could walk, but my apartment was at least 4 miles away. I could ask a stranger to borrow a phone, but I'd need to swallow considerable pride. And who would I call? The few friends my age who still drove wouldn't see a message for hours, and calling Daniel was out of the question. Lost in these thoughts, I hardly noticed when someone sat beside me until a cultured male voice spoke quietly. "Pardon me, but I couldn't help overhearing your predicament." I turned to find an elegant man in his early 70s sitting next to me. Dark sunglasses covered his eyes, and a white cane rested against the bench beside him. He was impeccably dressed in what my late husband would have called old money attire, a perfectly tailored light gray suit that managed to look comfortable despite the summer heat. "I'm fine, really," I said automatically, embarrassment coloring my voice. How much had he heard? A slight smile crossed his face. "I may be blind, but my hearing is excellent. Your son left you here without ensuring you had transportation home. That strikes me as inconsiderate." There was something about his direct assessment that bypassed my defenses. "That's one word for it," I admitted. "Another might be cruel." He angled his face toward me, his expression serious. "Pretend you're my wife," he said in a lower voice. "My driver is coming. Your son will regret leaving you like this." I blinked, taken aback by the unexpected offer. "I couldn't possibly." "I'm Robert Wilson," he continued smoothly, extending his hand with surprising accuracy toward mine. "And you are?" "Martha Collins," I replied, automatically, taking his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "Well, Martha Collins, I'm offering you a dignified solution to an undignified situation. No strings attached." He tilted his head slightly. "Unless you're uncomfortable accepting help from a blind old man?" Something in his self-deprecating tone made me smile despite everything. "Being blind doesn't make you incapable, Mr. Wilson. Just as being older doesn't make me incapable, despite what my son believes." He laughed then, a genuine sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes above his dark glasses. "Touché, Mrs. Collins. Then we understand each other." Before I could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver, a distinguished-looking man about my age, stepped out and approached us. "Right on time, James," Robert said, gathering his cane. "We'll be giving Mrs. Collins a ride home today." If James found this unusual, he didn't show it. "Of course, sir," he responded with a slight nod in my direction. "Ma'am." As James helped Robert to the car with practiced efficiency, I hesitated. I'd spent my life being cautious, sensible. Getting into cars with strangers, even elegant blind gentlemen with chauffeurs, wasn't something Martha Collins did. And yet, as my phone finally died with a sad little beep in my pocket, I found myself making a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "Thank you," I said, allowing James to open the rear door for me. The interior of the car was cool and smelled of leather and subtle cologne. "Where do we have the pleasure of taking you, Mrs. Collins?" Robert asked as James started the engine. I gave my address in the modest East Side neighborhood where I'd moved after selling our family home following Frank's death. Actually, Robert said after a moment's consideration, I hope you'll allow me to offer you tea first. My home is nearby, and after such an eventful afternoon, you might appreciate a moment to collect yourself before returning home. The proper response would have been to decline politely. Instead, I found myself considering what awaited me at my apartment. Empty rooms and the lingering echo of Daniel's frustrated voice, the weight of the day's humiliation pressed down on me. Tea would be lovely, I heard myself say. As we drove through increasingly upscale neighborhoods, I studied Robert Wilson more carefully. His silver hair was expertly cut, his hands manicured but strong. The blindness seemed to have done little to diminish his confident bearing. There was something almost theatrical in the precision of his movements, the way he turned his head when I spoke, how his expressions matched my tone perfectly. If you're wondering if you've made a terrible mistake accepting a ride from a stranger, he said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts, I assure you James has an impeccable driving record, and I'm far too old and respectable to be dangerous. I found myself chuckling. I was actually thinking you seem remarkably well adjusted for someone who can't see. Ah, he replied with a small smile. Well, one adapts, or one becomes bitter. I chose the former. When the car finally pulled through an ornate gate and up a curved driveway, I couldn't suppress a gasp. Robert Wilson's home was nothing short of a mansion, a stunning colonial revival with perfectly manicured grounds stretching in every direction. Welcome to my humble abode, Robert said with a hint of irony in his voice. I hope you like Earl Grey. The grandeur of Robert Wilson's humble abode left me momentarily speechless as James helped us from the car. The mansion stood 3 stories tall, its symmetrical facade featuring elegant columns and expansive windows that caught the late afternoon sun. Flower gardens bloomed in carefully orchestrated color patterns, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the gentle splash of a fountain. Your silence suggests either you're admiring the view or reconsidering the wisdom of having tea with a stranger, Robert commented as we approached the front entrance. It's a bit overwhelming, I admitted. You didn't mention you lived in a palace. His lips quirked upward. Hardly a palace, though I suppose it is rather large for one person and a small staff. The family has owned it for generations, and I find comfort in familiar surroundings, especially since losing my sight. As James opened the massive front door, I noticed something curious. Despite Robert's apparent blindness, there were no obvious accommodations for a visually impaired person. No textured pathways, no specially marked doorways. Everything was simply beautiful, designed for sighted appreciation. The house doesn't seem particularly adapted for, I hesitated. For a blind man? Robert finished for me. I prefer aesthetic beauty over practicality. I've memorized every inch of this place. 15 years without sight teaches one to map spaces quite efficiently. We entered a foyer with soaring ceilings and a grand staircase that curved upward like something from a classic film. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting rainbow prisms across marble floors. We'll take tea in the garden room, Robert told James, and perhaps some of those lemon biscuits Mrs. Chen made yesterday. Very good, sir, James replied, before disappearing down a hallway. Robert offered his arm with surprising accuracy. Shall we? The garden room offers a pleasant view of the east grounds, or so I'm told. I hesitated before taking his arm, struck again by how confident he seemed for someone who couldn't see. As we walked through the house, I noticed subtle details, the way he occasionally trailed his fingers along certain surfaces, how he counted steps under his breath between rooms. The garden room proved to be a sunlit conservatory with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking immaculately landscaped grounds. Comfortable wicker furniture with plush cushions created several seating areas among large potted plants. The effect was both grand and intimate, wealth displayed without ostentation. Please, make yourself comfortable, Robert said, gesturing to a seating arrangement near the windows. He settled himself in an adjacent chair with practiced ease, placing his cane carefully beside him. Have you lived here long? I asked, trying to reconcile this palatial home with the man before me. All my life, with a few intervals away for education and business, he replied. Though I've closed off portions of it since losing my sight, no point maintaining rooms I'll never see again. There was a wistfulness in his tone that touched me unexpectedly. I downsized after my husband died. I offered. Our family home felt too empty with just me rattling around in it. Frank, wasn't it? Your husband's name? I blinked in surprise. Yes, but I don't remember mentioning you were wearing a wedding band but referred to yourself as Mrs. Collins, not Miss. And you mentioned your son, so I made an educated guess, Robert explained smoothly. Was it a long marriage? 42 years, I replied. High school sweethearts, if you can believe such a cliché. He was an engineer. Heart attack took him 5 years ago. My condolences. A significant loss. James returned with a tea service that would have impressed the Queen. Delicate china, silver serving pieces, and an array of small sandwiches and biscuits arranged on tiered plates. Will there be anything else, sir? James asked after setting everything before us. No, thank you, James. We'll manage. Robert waited until James had left before speaking again. Now then, Martha Collins, former teacher, literature, I would guess from your speech patterns, widow, mother to at least one controlling son. Tell me why he left you stranded today. My hand froze midway to the teacup. How did you... Teachers have a particular way of expressing themselves. Precise vocabulary, complete sentences even in casual conversation. You mentioned being older, but not incapable, suggesting retirement. The rest I heard at the bus stop. His smile was gentle. I may be blind, but I'm far from unobservant. As he poured tea with surprising dexterity, I found myself telling Robert about Daniel's increasingly insistent campaign to move me into assisted living, how he'd arranged today's tour without consulting me, presenting it as a fait accompli, the argument that had escalated in the car afterward, culminating in my impulsive demand to be let out. You were asserting your independence, Robert nodded, and he responded by attempting to prove your dependence. Exactly. The validation from this stranger was unexpectedly powerful. Daniel doesn't see the irony. He claims I can't manage on my own, then abandons me without transportation to teach me a lesson about needing help. Children often struggle to see their parents as autonomous beings, Robert observed, sipping his tea. My daughter, Sophia, went through a similar phase after my sight deteriorated. She wanted to manage everything, my medical care, my business interests, my daily routine. It took time for her to understand that blindness hadn't diminished my competence. The tea was perfectly brewed, the sandwiches delicate and flavorful. As we continued talking, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't for months. Robert was an attentive listener and a thoughtful conversationalist, drawing connections between my experiences teaching adolescents and his navigating the business world. I founded a technology company specializing in security systems, he explained when I asked about his career. Ironic that I now can't see the very screens our software protects. Something about that statement struck me as odd, but before I could analyze it further, the door opened and a striking woman in her early 40s entered. Dad? James mentioned you had a guest. She stopped short upon seeing me, surprise evident in her expression. Sophia. Perfect timing, Robert said, turning his head in her direction. This is Martha Collins. Martha, my daughter Sophia Wilson. Sophia recovered quickly, extending a perfectly manicured hand. How lovely to meet you. Dad rarely entertains these days. Her tone was friendly but evaluative, her gaze taking in my simple dress and practical shoes with subtle assessment. I recognized the protective calculation in her eyes, the same look I'd given Frank's elderly aunts when they visited after his retirement. Your father rescued me from a rather awkward situation, I explained, briefly recounting my abandonment at the bus stop. Something in Sophia's face softened. That sounds exactly like something Dad would do. She glanced at her father with a mixture of exasperation and fondness, always collecting strays. Martha is hardly a stray, Robert countered. She's a retired literature teacher with a son who needs remedial education in respecting his mother's autonomy. Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her professional demeanor. Well, then you're in good hands. Dad has strong opinions about autonomy. She checked her watch. I can't stay. Board meeting in 30 minutes. Will you be at the foundation dinner tomorrow night? Wouldn't miss it, Robert replied. After Sophia departed with a quick kiss to her father's cheek, Robert tilted his head slightly. My daughter, he said with mock conspiracy, thinks I need constant supervision. The blindness makes her nervous, even after all these years. I studied him carefully, something about his demeanor nagging at me. She seems lovely, protective, but that's natural. Indeed, Robert set down his teacup with precision. Now, Shall we arrange to get you home before your son sends out a search party? James drove me home as the evening shadows lengthened across the city. Robert insisted on accompanying me, saying something about completing the rescue properly. We sat side by side in the luxurious back seat, close enough that I could detect the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated with notes of sandalwood. Your son will likely be worried by now, Robert remarked as we turned onto my street. I checked my watch and sighed. It's been 3 hours since he left me. He's either frantic or still fuming. My apartment building came into view, a modest but well-maintained complex where most residents were retirees like myself. Nothing like the palatial estate we'd just left, but it was home. There's a car parked in front of your building. Dark blue sedan, man pacing beside it, Robert observed casually. I squinted through the windshield. That's Daniel. Then I froze, turning to look at Robert sharply. How did you... The car stopped, and Robert's hand found mine with unerring accuracy. Martha, would you indulge me in a small performance? He asked, ignoring my unfinished question. I'd like your son to witness your return. Understanding dawned slowly. You want him to see me arriving in a chauffeur-driven luxury car with a wealthy companion. Precisely. His smile held a hint of mischief that made him suddenly appear younger. A small lesson in presumptions, perhaps. I should have refused. It was childish, really, a petty revenge. But I thought of Daniel's dismissive tone, the way he'd driven off leaving me stranded, his absolute certainty that I couldn't manage without him. What did you have in mind? I asked. Robert's plan was simple. James would open my door with formal deference. Robert would exit with my assistance, playing up his blindness slightly. I would make introductions, and Robert would express delight at finally meeting my son, perhaps mentioning our plans for the coming week. Nothing explicitly false, Robert assured me. Just enough to make him reconsider his assumptions about your capabilities and connections. As James pulled up behind Daniel's car, I saw my son turn, his expression transitioning from worry to confusion at the sight of the luxury vehicle. His eyes widened as James emerged to open my door with a formal Mrs. Collins that carried clearly in the evening air. I stepped out, conscious of Daniel watching, and turned to assist Robert as we'd planned. He emerged with dignified care, dark glasses in place, his hand finding my arm with the practiced touch of someone accustomed to navigating the world without sight. Mom! Daniel hurried over, relief and bewilderment battling across his features. I've been calling for hours. Your phone died, I supplied calmly. The battery was nearly gone when you left me at the bus stop. He had the grace to look ashamed, his eyes darting between me and Robert, clearly trying to make sense of the scene before him. Daniel, I'd like you to meet Robert Wilson, I said with deliberate formality. Robert, my son Daniel. A pleasure, Robert said, extending his hand in Daniel's general direction. I've heard so much about you. Daniel shook his hand automatically, professional instincts kicking in despite his confusion. I can't say the same. Mom hasn't mentioned you. We only just met today, I explained, watching realization dawn in Daniel's eyes as he noticed the white cane and dark glasses, after I found myself unexpectedly at a bus stop without transportation. The implication hung in the air between us. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Wilson kindly offered me a ride home, and we discovered a mutual interest in early American literature. I continued smoothly. He's invited me to a foundation dinner tomorrow evening. Foundation dinner? Daniel echoed. The Wilson Family Foundation, Robert clarified. We provide funding for arts education and accessibility programs. Martha's experience as an educator offers valuable perspective. I watched my son reassessing the situation, his marketing executive mind visibly recalculating based on new data. The car, the driver, the foundation, the unmistakable signs of wealth that Robert carried effortlessly. That's wonderful, Daniel managed. Mom has always been passionate about education. Indeed, Robert replied. Her insights on making literature accessible across generations are particularly relevant to our current initiatives. He turned slightly toward me. Until tomorrow, then? James will collect you at 6. I look forward to it, I replied, playing my part with perhaps too much enjoyment. Robert's hand found mine, raising it briefly to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture that seemed perfectly natural coming from him. The pleasure was entirely mine, Martha. As James helped Robert back into the car, Daniel stood frozen beside me, visibly processing what he was witnessing. The sleek vehicle pulled away with a quiet purr, leaving us alone on the sidewalk. "Mom," Daniel began carefully, "who exactly is Robert Wilson?" "A gentleman who understood that my age doesn't define my competence," I replied, retrieving my keys from my pocket and heading toward the building entrance. Daniel followed, still struggling to align this new information with his existing perception of his mother. When did I meet a wealthy, cultured man who values my company and opinions?" I glanced back at him. "About 20 minutes after you drove away and left me stranded." Inside my apartment, Daniel paced while I put on the kettle for tea, a far simpler affair than the service at Robert's mansion, but comforting in its familiarity. "I was worried sick," Daniel finally said. "When you weren't home and your phone went straight to voicemail, I checked the hospitals, Mom. That must have been frightening for you," I acknowledged, measuring tea leaves into my favorite pot. "Almost as frightening as being abandoned without transportation or sufficient funds." He winced. "I was angry. I shouldn't have left you there." "No, you shouldn't have," I agreed, my voice firm but not unkind. "Just as you shouldn't make decisions about my living arrangements without consulting me first." Daniel sank onto my sofa, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my irritation softened slightly. "I'm worried about you living alone, Mom. The stairs in this building, the distance from my family, your arthritis getting worse, all legitimate concerns," I said, bringing our tea to the coffee table, "which we could discuss as equals, rather than you making pronouncements about what's best for me as if I were a child, like that senior facility today." "Exactly like that." Daniel studied me over his teacup. "So, Robert Wilson, he seemed impressive." I couldn't help smiling at the transparent attempt to extract information. "He is. And you're having dinner with him tomorrow?" "With him and his foundation board, yes." My son hesitated. "I'm sorry I left you at that bus stop. It was childish and cruel." "Yes, it was," I agreed, then reached over to pat his hand. "But it led to an unexpected adventure. Perhaps we should both remember that I'm still capable of those." After Daniel left, with multiple apologies and a promise to discuss, not dictate, future plans, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying the events of this extraordinary day. One detail continued to nag at me: Robert's comment about Daniel's car. How had a blind man known its color, or that someone was pacing beside it? And there had been other moments, the way he'd navigated his home with too much precision, how he'd noticed my wedding band, his perfectly aimed gestures, small inconsistencies that together formed a pattern I couldn't quite decipher. As I prepared for bed, my phone, now recharged, chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "I hope our small performance provided satisfactory results. Looking forward to tomorrow's dinner. Sleep well. RW." I stared at the screen, wondering exactly what sort of man I'd actually met today, and why the prospect of seeing him again filled me with such unexpected anticipation. I spent the following morning distracted, my thoughts repeatedly returning to Robert Wilson and the peculiar inconsistencies in his behavior. While watering my modest collection of houseplants, I found myself analyzing our interaction with the same critical attention I once applied to complex literary texts with my students. A blind man who noticed a blue car and a pacing figure from a moving vehicle, who poured tea with perfect precision, whose home lacked the tactile modifications one would expect, who texted me directly rather than having his assistant do so. The obvious conclusion seemed impossible: that Robert Wilson, wealthy philanthropist, was not actually blind. But if that were true, why maintain such an elaborate deception? What purpose could it possibly serve? At noon, a delivery arrived, an elegant box containing a handwritten note in flowing script. "For this evening's foundation dinner, I took the liberty of having Sophia select something appropriate. If it's not to your taste, please disregard. Robert." Inside was a stunning deep blue dress in exactly my size, with a cashmere wrap and tasteful jewelry to complement it. The presumption should have offended me. Instead, I found myself carefully hanging the dress to release any wrinkles, my fingers lingering on the luxurious fabric. It had been years since anyone had given me clothing as a gift, longer still since I'd had occasion to wear something so elegant. My phone rang as I was examining the accompanying sapphire earrings. "Mom?" Daniel's voice carried a tentative note I rarely heard from my confident son. I wanted to check in after yesterday. I'm fine, Daniel, I assured him, settling into my reading chair. In fact, I'm preparing for this evening's event. About that, he cleared his throat. I did some research on Robert Wilson. Of course he had. Daniel never could resist investigating anything that didn't fit his orderly worldview. And he's not just wealthy, Mom. Forbes estimates his net worth at over $3 billion. His security technology company revolutionized digital privacy protocols, and he's been almost completely reclusive since going blind 15 years ago. I absorbed this information slowly. 3 billion. The number seemed abstract, disconnected from the attentive man who had rescued me from a bus stop. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Daniel hesitated. Because it's odd that someone who rarely appears in public would suddenly take an interest in my mother. I'm concerned he might have ulterior motives. Such as? I couldn't keep the amusement from my voice. Seducing a 67-year-old retired teacher for her vast fortune in secondhand books? Mom, please, I'm serious. Men like Wilson operate differently. Everything is strategic. Perhaps his strategy was simply kindness to a stranger, I suggested. Not everything has an angle, Daniel. After ending the call with reassurances that I would be careful, I returned to contemplating the blue dress and the enigmatic man who had sent it. My teacher's mind couldn't let go of the inconsistencies, the puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. I found myself doing my own research, typing Robert Wilson blind technology magnate into my tablet search engine. The results were illuminating. Articles described Wilson as a reclusive genius who had continued directing his company remotely after losing his sight to a degenerative condition. Photos showed a younger Robert at industry events, always immaculately dressed, often alongside world leaders and technology pioneers. More recent images were scarce, occasional blurry paparazzi shots showing him with dark glasses and a cane, always accompanied by James or his daughter. One financial blog speculated about his strategic retreat from public life, noting how his personal reclusiveness contrasted with his company's high profile and his foundation's active community presence. Another article mentioned persistent rumors that his condition was less severe than reported, citing anonymous former employees who claimed he maintained more control over daily operations than publicly acknowledged. Nothing conclusive, but enough to feed my growing suspicion that Robert Wilson's blindness might be, at least partially, a carefully constructed facade. By late afternoon, I found myself preparing for the evening with unusual care. I styled my silver hair in a more elegant arrangement than my typical practical bob, applied makeup with an attention to detail I hadn't bothered with in years, and slipped into the blue dress, which fit as if it had been made for me. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The woman reflected back appeared confident, distinguished, even attractive in a way I'd stopped considering relevant to my identity. Precisely at 6, my doorbell rang. James stood in the hallway, as formal and correct as the previous day. Mrs. Collins, he greeted me with a slight bow. Mr. Wilson sends his apologies for not collecting you personally. He's attending to last-minute arrangements for the dinner. Of course, I replied, gathering the cashmere wrap in a small evening bag. The dress is lovely, by the way. Please thank Mr. Wilson for his thoughtfulness. He has an excellent eye for such things, James said, then froze almost imperceptibly as if catching himself in an error. That is to say, he has excellent taste and trusted advisors. I noted the slip with interest, but made no comment as he escorted me to the waiting car. The foundation dinner was being held at the Wilson Museum of Contemporary Art, a modernist structure of glass and stone on the city's waterfront. As we approached, I observed people in formal attire ascending the wide steps, camera flashes occasionally illuminating the night, as photographers documented the arrival of what appeared to be minor celebrities and local dignitaries. There will be press, James warned as we pulled up to the entrance. Mr. Wilson asked me to escort you directly inside to avoid unnecessary attention. The efficiency with which James navigated me through a side entrance and into a private elevator suggested this was a well-established protocol. We emerged into a quieter hallway where Robert stood waiting, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, his dark glasses exchanged for a different pair with subtly tinted lenses. Martha, he greeted me, turning at the sound of our approach with that too-perfect timing I'd noticed before. "You came. Did you doubt I would?" I asked, allowing him to take my hand. "People often find my world intimidating," he replied. "The dress suits you perfectly." "Yes," I said, watching his face carefully. "Sophia has an excellent eye." "She does," he agreed smoothly, "though I selected the color myself. Dark blue has a depth that complements your voice." "My voice has a color?" His smile deepened, creating fine lines around his mouth that hadn't been apparent the day before. "When one sense is diminished, others compensate in fascinating ways." I decided to test a small theory. "The earrings are particularly beautiful," I said, deliberately not touching them or making any sound that would indicate their location. Without hesitation, Robert's hand rose to hover near my right ear, exactly where the sapphire glinted. "Simple elegance suits you better than ostentation." His fingers were inches from my ear, close enough that I could feel their warmth. We stood suspended in that almost touch for several heartbeats before James discreetly cleared his throat. "Sir, the guests are assembling for the reception. Ms. Wilson asked me to remind you about greeting the mayor before dinner." Robert's hand dropped, and the moment shattered. "Duty calls," he said with a slight sigh. "Shall we brave the crowds together, Martha? I find these events more tolerable with pleasant company." He offered his arm with the practiced gesture of a blind man, but as I took it, I couldn't shake the certainty that those tinted glasses were observing me with perfect clarity. The question wasn't whether Robert Wilson could see. I was now convinced he could. The question was why he pretended otherwise, and whether I should confront him with what I suspected. For now, I decided, I would observe and gather evidence, approaching the mystery of Robert Wilson with the same methodical analysis I'd once applied to Shakespearean deceptions with my senior students. After all, as I'd often told them, the most interesting characters are always those with secrets. The Wilson Foundation's annual gala proved to be a masterclass in elegant philanthropy. The museum's grand hall had been transformed into a sophisticated dining space, with tables arranged around a small stage and podium. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over arrangements of white orchids and blue hydrangeas that matched my dress so perfectly I wondered if it had been a deliberate coordination. With Robert's arm linked through mine, we navigated the crowd with what appeared to be well-rehearsed precision. He moved confidently, occasionally touching my arm or leaning closer as if needing guidance through particularly dense clusters of guests. Yet I noticed how he never bumped into anyone, how he seemed to anticipate movements before they occurred, how his face turned toward approaching people seconds before they spoke. "Robert, marvelous event as always," called a silver-haired woman in an elaborate emerald gown. "And who is your lovely companion?" "Elaine Harrington, chairman of the City Symphony Board," Robert murmured to me before raising his voice. "Elaine, may I present Martha Collins, a retired literature professor whose insights on educational accessibility have been invaluable." I shook her hand, noting how Robert had upgraded my high school teaching position to a professorship. "A pleasure to meet you." "Professor Collins," Elaine beamed. "How refreshing to see new faces in Robert's circle. He's become such a recluse these past years." "With good reason," Robert replied smoothly. "Large gatherings are challenging without sight." Of course," Elaine backpedaled immediately. "I didn't mean—" "No offense taken," he assured her. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe the mayor is waving for my attention." He wasn't, of course. The mayor was deep in conversation with a group of businessmen near the bar, his back to us. "The mayor is actually engaged elsewhere," I observed quietly as we moved away from Elaine. Robert's lips quirked upward. "Is he? How convenient." Elaine's charity donations are inversely proportional to her conversational tact. I laughed, despite myself. "A useful social escape strategy, claiming to see people who need your attention?" His steps faltered almost imperceptibly, and I realized my verbal trap too late. "A figure of speech," he recovered smoothly. "James usually signals me when someone is trying to catch my eye. But James was nowhere near us at that moment, and we both knew it. Before I could press the point, Sophia appeared, elegant in a burgundy gown that complemented her dark hair. "Dad, we're about to begin the presentation. Martha, I've seated you at our family table." She glanced between us, a flicker of suspicion crossing her features. "I hope you're enjoying yourself." "Immensely," I replied. Your father has been introducing me to quite an impressive array of people. Has he? Sophia's voice carried a note of concern. Dad excels at networking despite his limitations. The slight emphasis wasn't lost on me. Sophia was marking territory, reminding me of her father's vulnerability, or at least his purported vulnerability. Dinner was a sumptuous 5-course affair, interspersed with brief speeches about the foundation's work. Robert delivered his remarks with charismatic precision, never once looking at notes he couldn't read, moving across the stage with practiced steps that appeared cautious, but never uncertain. I watched the performance with newfound awareness, seeing how the audience responded with that particular combination of admiration and sympathy reserved for those who overcome adversity. When he returned to our table, I leaned close under the pretext of helping him locate his water glass. Impressive speech. One might almost forget you can't see your audience. He stiffened momentarily, then relaxed, his fingers finding mine beneath the tablecloth. One prepares thoroughly when performing blind, he murmured. Emphasis on the final word so subtle, I might have imagined it. Throughout dinner, I catalogued more discrepancies. Robert identified a piece of asparagus on his plate without touching it. He reacted to Sophia's subtle hand signals from across the table. Most tellingly, when a waiter accidentally dropped a tray of glasses at the far end of the room, Robert's head turned toward the crash a fraction of a second before it occurred, as if he'd seen the tray teetering. After dessert, the formal portion of the evening concluded, and guests began mingling again as a small orchestra played soft classical music. Robert guided me toward a quieter alcove near the museum's sculpture garden. You've been unusually quiet, he observed, 2 champagne flutes in hand. Having second thoughts about associating with me? Not at all, I replied, accepting the offered glass. I'm simply observing. And what have your observations revealed, Professor Collins? There was a hint of challenge in his voice, almost playful. I took a deliberate sip of champagne, considering my approach. The teacher in me wanted to lay out my evidence methodically. The woman who had been patronized and underestimated by her son wanted to demonstrate her mental acuity. But something else, something more intrigued than indignant, guided my response. That Robert Wilson navigates his world with remarkable precision for a man who supposedly can't see it. His expression remained neutral, but his posture changed subtly. A slight tensing of shoulders, a marginal straightening of his spine. The human brain adapts impressively to sensory loss. Spatial memory, auditory cues. Yes, and noticing blue cars from moving vehicles, identifying earrings without touching them, turning toward accidents before they happen. I set down my champagne glass with deliberate precision. I taught literature for 40 years, Mr. Wilson. I recognize a carefully constructed narrative when I see one. For several long moments, he said nothing, his face angled slightly away from mine as if considering his options. When he turned back, his voice had dropped to just above a whisper. This is hardly the venue for such a conversation. Then suggest a better one, I replied, surprised by my own boldness. A slight smile curved his mouth. You are not what I expected, Martha Collins. I rarely am these days. Age has a way of liberating one from expectations. He nodded thoughtfully. The sculpture garden. 10 minutes. Take the east door and follow the path to the fountain. Before I could respond, he straightened and raised his voice to normal levels. Sophia, there you are. I was just telling Martha about your remarkable work with the Foundation's educational initiatives. Sophia had approached so silently I hadn't noticed her. Yet Robert had. Another slip in his performance. She glanced between us, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes shrewd. Nothing remarkable about it. Just continuing your vision, she replied. Martha, I hope Dad hasn't monopolized your entire evening. There are several board members who'd love to hear your educational perspective. The subtle dismissal was clear. Sophia wanted time alone with her father, perhaps to question my presence, perhaps to warn him about whatever she suspected might be developing between us. I was just about to visit the ladies' room anyway, I said pleasantly. If you'll excuse me? As I walked away, I could feel their eyes, both pairs, I was certain, following me across the room. 10 minutes, Robert had said. 10 minutes until I would potentially hear the truth behind the performance I'd been witnessing. I checked my reflection in the restroom mirror, adjusting a strand of silver hair that had come loose. The woman who gazed back at me appeared poised, elegant, and unexpectedly resolute. Daniel wouldn't recognize this version of his mother, the woman willing to meet a near stranger in a darkened garden to confront him about a suspected deception. For that matter, I hardly recognized myself. Yet as I slipped through the east door into the cool evening air, I felt more alive than I had in years. The sculpture garden was a study in shadows and soft illumination. Strategic lighting highlighted modernist installations while leaving pathways in gentle darkness. The night air carried the scent of jasmine and the distant murmur of the gala continuing inside. I followed the stone path as instructed, my heels clicking softly against the pavers, until I reached a circular fountain where water cascaded over black marble in a hypnotic pattern. Robert was already there, his back to me, silhouetted against the illuminated water. He had removed his tinted glasses, and they dangled from one hand. Without turning, he spoke. "You counted 7 discrepancies in my performance tonight. I noticed you cataloging them." I approached slowly, coming to stand beside him. 8, actually. Now he turned, and for the first time, I saw his eyes directly, clear, sharp, and unmistakably focused on mine. No cloudiness, no wandering gaze, nothing to suggest any visual impairment whatsoever. 8, he conceded with a slight nod. "What gave me away?" "The blue car yesterday was the first clue," I replied, maintaining his gaze steadily. "But it was the earrings tonight that confirmed it. You reached for them without any auditory cue about their location. A careless mistake. Normally I'm more disciplined." "Why?" I asked simply. "Why pretend to be blind?" Robert sighed and gestured to a stone bench nearby. "Shall we sit?" It's a rather long explanation. The bench was cool beneath me as we settled side by side, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. Robert pocketed his glasses, apparently having no further use for them in my presence. 15 years ago, he began, I wasn't just wealthy, I was visible. Magazine covers, television interviews, private meetings with presidents and prime ministers. My company's security innovations made me a public figure in a field where anonymity is ironically the ultimate luxury. He paused, his profile sharp against the darkness. Then came the threats, not just the standard corporate espionage or random harassment that comes with wealth, but targeted threats against my family. Sophia was still in college then. Someone sent her photographs taken inside her dormitory room, along with specifications about the security systems protecting our homes, implying they could breach them at will. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. How terrifying. Indeed, we increased security naturally, but the psychological damage was done. Privacy, true privacy, had become impossible. His hands flexed in his lap, a subtle tell of remembered stress. Then I developed macular degeneration, mild, treatable, hardly debilitating with modern medicine. But it gave me an idea, to disappear while remaining visible, I murmured, understanding dawning. Precisely. He turned toward me, his gaze direct and unwavering. The world treats blind people differently. They look away. They speak as if you're not there. They underestimate you in profound ways. I saw an opportunity to create a shield, a way to move through the world with everyone seeing only what I wanted them to see. A wealthy, blind recluse inspiring occasional human interest stories, but otherwise left alone. But the charade is so elaborate, I observed. Your home, your behavior, this foundation. It began as a temporary solution, a respite from public scrutiny. But the longer it continued, the more it became a prison of my own making. His voice carried a weariness I hadn't detected before. Now only James and Sophia know the truth. And you, Martha Collins, who saw through me with remarkable clarity after less than 2 days. I considered this extraordinary confession, turning it over in my mind. The foundation work is genuine, though. Absolutely, he confirmed. Initially, the Blindness Foundation was part of the cover story, but I discovered a genuine passion for accessibility issues. The irony isn't lost on me. A sighted man advocating for the visually impaired while pretending to be one of them. A complicated ethical position, I observed without judgment. One that keeps me awake at night more often than I'd care to admit. He smiled ruefully. I've donated millions to blindness research and accessibility technology, perhaps as a form of penance. We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the fountain's gentle splashing providing a soothing backdrop. When I finally spoke, I surprised myself with the question, Why tell me the truth? You could have maintained the deception. I'm hardly a threat to your carefully constructed world. Robert turned fully toward me, his expression suddenly vulnerable, in a way his blind persona never was. Because when I sat next to you at that bus stop, I recognized something I haven't encountered in 15 years: authenticity. You weren't performing for anyone, Martha. Even humiliated and abandoned, you maintained a dignity that had nothing to do with appearances. His candor caught me off guard. For a man who had lived behind a facade for so long, this revelation seemed almost painfully honest. And then, he continued, you started noticing the inconsistencies. Most people see what they expect to see. You actually observed. It was refreshing, terrifying, but refreshing. Terrifying? You? I couldn't hide my skepticism. A billionaire afraid of a retired teacher? Not afraid of you, he clarified. Afraid of being seen. Really seen, without the protection of either wealth or disability to distort the perception. His hand moved tentatively toward mine on the bench between us. Do you understand what I'm saying, Martha? I did, with surprising clarity. Robert Wilson, for all his wealth and power, had been hiding from genuine connection. The blindness that began as protection had become a barrier between himself and authentic human interaction. What will you do now? I asked, allowing his fingers to lightly touch mine. Maintain the charade with everyone else? For now, he admitted. The alternative would be complicated, to say the least. But with you, he hesitated. With you, I'd like to be simply Robert. No performance, no pretense. The vulnerability in his request touched something in me. A recognition of how rare, truly honest connections become as we age. How much of life becomes performance and accommodation. I think I'd like that, I replied softly. Though it makes me wonder what other surprises you might be concealing, Mr. Wilson. His laugh was unexpected and genuine. Fair concern, but I promise, the fake blindness was my most significant deception. Everything else, the wealth, the foundation, my character, that's all authentic. A discreet cough interrupted us. James stood at the garden entrance, his expression professionally neutral, despite having undoubtedly witnessed our hands touching and Robert without his glasses. Sir, Ms. Wilson is looking for you. The mayor is preparing to leave and wishes to say goodbye. Robert sighed, reluctantly withdrawing his hand from mine. Back to the performance, he murmured, retrieving his glasses from his pocket. As he slid them on, I watched the transformation. His posture subtly altered. His expression became more guarded, his movements more measured. Before we returned to the gala, he turned to me one last time. Having someone who knows the truth, who knows me, after all these years, he paused, searching for words. It feels like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. As we re-entered the bright lights and social choreography of the gala, I wondered what I had gotten myself into. A friendship? Something more? And with a man whose entire public existence was built on an elaborate deception. Yet something about his confession in the garden felt more genuine than anything I'd experienced in years. Sophia intercepted us immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly at our joint reappearance from the garden. There you are, Dad. The mayor's leaving. Her gaze flicked to me, assessing. Martha, I hope you've enjoyed our little event. It's been illuminating, I replied, meeting her eyes steadily. Her perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly at my word choice, but before she could respond, Robert squeezed my hand discreetly. Most illuminating indeed, he agreed, the private joke between us almost palpable in the air. The following week unfolded like a dream sequence, familiar routines interrupted by surreal moments that left me questioning the boundaries of my formerly predictable life. Robert called daily, our conversations ranging from literature to philosophy to the small details of our lives. He spoke freely now when we were alone, the pretense of blindness abandoned in private moments. On Wednesday, he invited me to dinner at his home. A proper meal, he specified, not just impromptu tea for a stranded bus passenger. I accepted, ignoring the small voice of caution that had governed much of my adult life. At 67, I reasoned, I had earned the right to make imprudent choices. Daniel called that afternoon. His timing so suspicious, I wondered if he had somehow developed a sixth sense for his mother's unconventional decisions. I looked into the Wilson Foundation, he announced without preamble. Their educational initiatives are actually quite impressive. They've funded literacy programs in 20 states. How thorough of you, I replied, selecting earrings for the evening. Any particular reason for your research? Just making sure everything's legitimate. His hesitation was telling. You've been spending time with this man? I sighed, setting down the earrings. Daniel, your concern is noted but unnecessary. Robert Wilson is exactly what he appears to be, a wealthy philanthropist with an interest in education. The irony of this statement, technically accurate while concealing the truth about Robert's vision, wasn't lost on me. I had become complicit in his deception, at least by omission. So you're seeing him socially? Daniel pressed. We're friends, I replied, the definition feeling simultaneously inadequate and presumptuous. What were we exactly? Two people who had shared an unusual moment of honesty, connected by a secret and perhaps by something more elusive. When I arrived at Robert's mansion that evening, the atmosphere had changed subtly from my first visit. James greeted me with the same formal courtesy, but led me to a smaller, more intimate dining room instead of the grand formal one I'd glimpsed previously. The table was set for two, with candles providing most of the illumination, and a fire crackling in a stone hearth nearby. Robert awaited me without his dark glasses, dressed casually in a tailored shirt and slacks rather than his usual formal attire. The sight of him, relaxed, unguarded, visibly pleased by my arrival, caused an unexpected flutter in my chest. No performance tonight, he said, gesturing to his eyes. Just us. No audience to convince, I agreed, accepting the glass of wine he offered. Except perhaps Sophia, who will almost certainly interrogate the kitchen staff tomorrow about our dinner. I raised an eyebrow. She doesn't approve of me. She's protective, Robert clarified, leading me to the table. And suspicious by nature, a quality that serves her well as CEO. She hasn't quite determined whether you're a potential threat or a positive development in my life. And which am I? The question emerged more boldly than I'd intended. Robert considered me over his wine glass, his gaze direct in a way that still startled me after seeing him perform blindness so convincingly. Both, perhaps. You've disrupted a carefully maintained equilibrium, but not necessarily in an unwelcome way. The dinner that followed was exquisite. Dishes I recognized from my teaching trip to Italy decades ago, prepared with authentic precision. Throughout the meal, our conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by moments of companionable silence that felt as natural as the dialogue. I've been thinking about your situation, I said as we lingered over dessert. The ethical implications of your deception. Ah, Robert set down his fork. I wondered when the professor would deliver her moral assessment. Not an assessment, I corrected. A question. Has it been worth it? 15 years of performing blindness, the isolation, the constant vigilance against slipping up. What has it given you that compensates for what it's taken away? He didn't answer immediately, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass with contemplative precision. Safety, initially. Peace, to some degree. The freedom to observe without being observed. A one-way mirror between myself and the world. He looked up, meeting my eyes. But lately, I've been questioning whether the protection is worth the isolation. Because of me? I asked, suddenly self-conscious. Because of what meeting you revealed, he clarified. How habitual the performance has become, how reflexive the barriers. You saw through them with such ease that it made me wonder how much of myself I've lost behind them. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. Before I could respond, however, the dining room door opened abruptly, and Sophia entered without announcement. She froze at the threshold, her eyes widening as she registered her father without his glasses, clearly looking directly at me in the candlelight. Dad? Her voice held equal measures of confusion and alarm. Robert didn't startle or scramble for his glasses as I might have expected. Instead, he sighed softly and gestured to the empty chair beside him. Join us, Sophia. It seems we have something to discuss. Her gaze darted between us, comprehension dawning slowly. She knows? The question emerged half-whispered, as if the words themselves might be dangerous. She figured it out, Robert confirmed. Rather quickly, in fact. Sophia turned to me, her professional polish cracking to reveal genuine fear beneath. Who have you told? No one, I assured her, understanding her panic. And I have no intention of telling anyone. She remained standing, her posture rigid with tension. Do you have any idea what's at stake here? The foundation, the company, our privacy, our safety? All of it depends on maintaining this arrangement. I understand the complexity of the situation, I replied calmly, drawing on decades of diffusing classroom tensions. Your father's secret is safe with me. Based on what? She challenged. A week's acquaintance? Some misguided romantic connection? The dismissive way she characterized our relationship stung more than I cared to admit. Robert intervened before I could respond. Sophia, that's enough. Martha has shown more insight and discretion in 1 week than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. I trust her. You trusted her enough to risk everything we've built, Sophia countered, finally sinking into the chair beside him. Without consulting me? I didn't plan this, Robert explained with remarkable patience. Martha observed discrepancies no one else has noticed in 15 years. Rather than expose me publicly or use the information for personal gain, she confronted me privately. Sophia studied me with new intensity, reassessing. What do you want from us, Mrs. Collins? The blunt question caught me off guard. Want? From this situation, from my father. There must be something. Sophia? Robert's voice carried a rare sharpness. It's a fair question, I interjected, understanding her protective instinct. I turned to face her directly. What I want is exactly what I've already received. Honest conversation, genuine connection, the respect of being seen as I am rather than as a stereotype of aging widowhood. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Your father offered me dignity when my own son treated me as incompetent. I've offered him the simple courtesy of authentic interaction without performance. Sophia's expression softened marginally, though wariness remained in her eyes. And if things progress between you, the longer this continues, the greater the risk of exposure. The implication that any relationship between Robert and me created vulnerability in their carefully constructed world hung in the air between us. Before I could formulate a response, Robert reached across the table and deliberately took my hand. Then we'll address that challenge together, he said, his gaze moving from his daughter to me. Because for the first time in 15 years, I'm experiencing something worth the risk. The simple declaration shifted something in the atmosphere. Sophia's rigid posture eased slightly, and I felt a warm certainty spread through me that had nothing to do with the wine or the fire's heat. Whatever complicated path lay ahead, we would navigate it together. Two people who had recognized in each other something rare and worth protecting. I should go, I said finally, aware that father and daughter needed privacy to process this development. It's getting late. As James drove me home later that evening, I reflected on the extraordinary turn my life had taken since that moment at the bus stop. 1 week ago, I had been a retired teacher fighting for autonomy against my well-meaning but controlling son. Now I was entangled in a billionaire's elaborate deception, contemplating a relationship that would require navigating complexities I could scarcely imagine. Yet despite the complications, or perhaps because of them, I felt more vibrantly alive than I had in years. Saturday morning brought unexpected sunshine after days of spring rain. I was enjoying coffee on my small balcony when the intercom buzzed, announcing a visitor. Daniel stood in the hallway, a bakery box in hand and an expression of determined cheerfulness on his face. Peace offering, he said, lifting the box. Those almond croissants you like. I recognized the gesture for what it was, an attempt to reset our relationship after the bus stop incident. The timing, however, seemed suspiciously aligned with my developing connection to Robert. Over coffee and pastries, Daniel maintained careful conversation about neutral topics, his children's activities, an upcoming work conference, neighborhood news. Only after his second cup did he broach the subject clearly weighing on his mind. So, this friendship with Robert Wilson, he began, with practiced casualness. It seems to be continuing. It is, I confirmed, brushing pastry crumbs from my fingers. We enjoy each other's company. Daniel nodded, his marketing executive mind visibly calculating approaches. He's an interesting choice of friend. His reputation for reclusiveness is well documented. Perhaps that's changing, I replied non-committally. Mom, Daniel set down his cup with deliberate precision. I want you to be careful. Men like Wilson operate in different spheres with different rules. The power imbalance alone. Power imbalance? I interrupted, unable to suppress a laugh. I'm not a naive young woman being dazzled by wealth, Daniel. I'm a 67-year-old retired teacher who's raised a child, buried a husband, and managed her own life quite capably. That's not what I meant. He had the grace to look abashed. It's just that people with his level of wealth and influence often have complicated lives, agendas that aren't immediately apparent. If only he knew how accurate his concern was, though not in the way he imagined. Robert's complicated life extended far beyond typical wealthy eccentricity. I appreciate your concern, I said, softening my tone. But I trust my judgment about Robert, complicated life and all. Daniel appeared ready to press the issue further when his phone buzzed. Checking the screen, his expression shifted to surprised recognition. It's the office, on a Saturday. I should take this. He stepped onto the balcony for privacy, leaving me to clear the breakfast dishes. Through the glass door, I observed his conversation transform from irritation to intense interest. When he returned, his demeanor had completely changed. That was incredible, he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. My agency just got a call from the Wilson Foundation. They're looking for a marketing partner for their National Literacy Initiative, and somehow my name came up as a recommended contact. I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I was connecting obvious dots. What a fortunate coincidence. Coincidence? Daniel repeated slowly, studying my face. Mom, did you have something to do with this? I mentioned to Robert that you work in marketing, I admitted. Nothing more specific than that. Daniel sat heavily on my sofa, processing this development. This account would be significant. The foundation's annual marketing budget is in the millions. Then you should prepare a compelling presentation, I suggested mildly. He looked up sharply. Is this why you've been spending time with Wilson? To advance my career? The question stung with its presumption that my relationship with Robert must serve some ulterior purpose. Absolutely not. My friendship with Robert stands entirely on its own merits. If he's chosen to consider your agency, that's his business decision. Daniel had the decency to look embarrassed. I'm sorry. That was unfair. He paused, weighing his next words. It's just difficult to reconcile the reclusive billionaire from business journals with the man who's suddenly having dinner with my mother. People are often more complex than their public personas suggest, I replied, the understatement almost making me smile despite my irritation. After Daniel left to prepare for his unexpected business opportunity, I received a text from Robert. Was that too transparent and olive branch? Sophia suggested a more subtle approach, but I find at my age that time for subtlety feels increasingly limited. RW. I smiled at the message. Transparent but effective. He's simultaneously suspicious and delighted, much like Sophia regarding our friendship. Sunday brunch tomorrow? The Botanical Gardens have a new spring exhibition. We can be appropriately public while maintaining our private understanding. The careful balance in his invitation, acknowledgement of both his public blindness persona and our private truth, touched me deeply. I'd like that very much. Sunday's Botanical Garden excursion introduced me to the intricacies of Robert's public performance. James drove us to the gardens, where Robert emerged from the car with dark glasses and white cane, his movements carefully calibrated to suggest dependence while maintaining dignity. I found myself unconsciously adapting to his needs, offering my arm at appropriate moments, describing visual elements in a natural way that reinforced his supposed condition. You're a natural accomplice, he murmured, as we strolled through a corridor of blooming cherry trees. Most people overcompensate. Too loud, too descriptive, too helpful. Years of teaching reluctant students to appreciate Shakespeare, I replied. One develops a certain subtlety in providing guidance while preserving dignity. We attracted occasional glances. The elegantly dressed blind man and his silver-haired companion generated curiosity without recognition. In public, Robert was careful to maintain appropriate distance, our connection expressed through conversation rather than physical proximity. It was only when we found ourselves momentarily alone in the tropical conservatory that he removed his glasses briefly, his eyes meeting mine directly. This performance grows exhausting in your presence, he admitted quietly. I find myself wanting to simply look at you, to see your expressions change without the filter of pretense. The intensity of his gaze made me suddenly conscious of my appearance in a way I hadn't been for years. The lines at the corners of my eyes, the silver of my hair, the subtle markers of age I'd long ago accepted. What do you see when you look at me? The question emerged unbidden. His smile deepened, creating a fan of lines that revealed his own age in the most appealing way. Clarity, intelligence, a woman comfortable in her own skin. He replaced his glasses as voices approached. A rare and beautiful combination at any age. Later, over lunch in the Gardens Cafe, our conversation turned to more practical matters. Sophia is arranging a discreet background check, he informed me, his tone apologetic. Standard protocol for anyone who learns about my situation. I set down my fork, surprisingly unhurt by this revelation. I assumed as much. She's protective of you. She's thorough, he corrected, and concerned about potential exploitation. The check is as much for your protection as mine, confirmation that you understand the legal implications of our shared secret. I considered this. There would be lawsuits if your deception became public? Almost certainly. Business partners, shareholders, even the foundation could claim fraud or misrepresentation. He sighed. The irony isn't lost on me. Having created this fiction for protection, I'm now potentially vulnerable because of it. And yet you've trusted me with this knowledge, I observed. A calculated risk, he replied with a small smile. Though increasingly, the calculation seems less important than the connection. As James drove us back to my apartment building, I found myself contemplating the strange duality of our developing relationship. In public, we performed one version of reality, the kindly blind billionaire and his helpful companion. In private, we shared a different truth. Two people discovering unexpected connection in their later years, complicated by an elaborate deception. Daniel's agency presentation to your foundation is tomorrow, I mentioned, as the car approached my building. Yes, Sophia will be evaluating their proposal, Robert confirmed. I've recused myself from the decision to avoid any appearance of favoritism. Thank you for that, I said. Whatever happens should be based on merit, not connection. He nodded, understanding my concern. Integrity matters to you, says the man pretending to be blind, I countered with gentle irony. His laugh was genuine, a rare sound I was coming to treasure. Touché, Martha Collins. You have a remarkable talent for cutting through pretense, even my own. James pulled to the curb outside my building, discreetly exiting to open my door. Before I could step out, Robert captured my hand briefly. Having someone who knows both versions of me, public and private, is more significant than I can adequately express, he said softly. Thank you for carrying that dual knowledge with such grace. The simple sincerity of his words stayed with me long after the car had disappeared from view. A warm certainty amidst the complexities of our unusual situation. The following weeks developed a rhythm that felt both extraordinary and strangely natural. Robert and I established a pattern of private dinners at his home, where he could be himself completely, and public outings where we navigated his carefully maintained blindness charade. Each setting offered its own particular intimacy, the private moments of unguarded conversation, the public conspiracy of shared secrets. Daniel's marketing agency had won the Wilson Foundation contract, a development that simultaneously delighted and perplexed my son. It was the strangest meeting, he confided during a family dinner at his home. Sophia Wilson grilled us like we were on trial, then announced we'd been selected before we even finished our presentation. Your proposal must have been exceptional, I suggested, avoiding Angela's knowing gaze across the table. My daughter-in-law had developed her own theories about my relationship with Robert, though she kept them largely to herself. That's just it. We didn't even present half our materials, Daniel continued, bewilderment evident. It was almost as if the decision had been made before we arrived. I maintained a neutral expression, though I suspected Robert had indeed influenced the process despite his claimed recusal. The contract represented a convenient bridge between our worlds, a professional connection that justified our personal one in Daniel's business-oriented mind. Our dessert was interrupted by a text message that made my heart quicken. Unexpected development. Need to speak with you urgently. Car on the way. RW. I made my excuses shortly afterward, claiming fatigue, though Daniel's suspicious glance suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Outside their suburban home, James was already waiting with the car, his expression more guarded than usual. What's happened? I asked once we were moving. Mr. Wilson will explain, he replied, offering nothing further. At the mansion, Robert waited in his study rather than the formal sitting room, a space I'd come to recognize as his true domain, where business decisions were made and real conversations happened. He stood by the window without his glasses, tension evident in his posture. "Victor Reeves," he said without preamble as I entered. "The investigative journalist I mentioned. He's publishing a feature article next week about the curious case of Robert Wilson's selective blindness." My stomach dropped. "He has evidence? Circumstantial but compelling." Robert gestured to a folder on his desk. "Sophia received an advance copy from a contact at the magazine. Reeves has been investigating for months, interviewing former staff, analyzing public appearances, even consulting medical experts about the consistency of my symptoms." I skimmed the article, which methodically built a case questioning Robert's condition without quite making direct accusations. The journalist had documented subtle inconsistencies in Robert's behavior at public events, noted the curious lack of medical specialists visiting the mansion, and quoted anonymous sources describing incidents where Robert had seemingly reacted to visual stimuli. "This stops just short of calling me a fraud," Robert observed, while planting the seed in readers' minds. "Legally careful, but practically damaging. What will you do?" He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "Sophia and our legal team are exploring options. A preemptive statement, potential legal action for defamation, or simply ignoring it and dismissing any questions as baseless speculation." I considered the article again. None of his evidence is definitive. It's all circumstantial, open to interpretation. "True," Robert agreed. "But it raises questions that could lead to greater scrutiny, which eventually might uncover more concrete evidence." I set the article down, understanding the unspoken concern. "Including my sudden appearance in your life," he nodded grimly. "Reeves mentions an unidentified female companion observed at recent public events. He's noticed you, Martha, though he hasn't identified you yet." The implications settled heavily between us. My presence in Robert's life had created a new vulnerability in his carefully constructed facade. The realization must have shown on my face because Robert moved quickly to sit beside me, taking my hands in his. "This isn't your fault," he said firmly. "Reeves has been investigating for months, long before we met. If anything, I've been growing careless over time, too comfortable in the performance." "Still," I replied, "my presence complicates your situation. Perhaps we should be more discreet until this passes." Robert's expression tightened. "Is that what you want? To step back from this relationship?" The question carried weight beyond the immediate crisis. We had been dancing around definitions, allowing our connection to evolve naturally, without explicit labels or declarations. Now, faced with external pressure, clarification seemed suddenly necessary. "No," I answered honestly. "That's not what I want at all." His relief was visible. "Good. Because I've grown quite attached to having you in my life, Martha Collins." The admission, simple as it was, shifted something between us. Robert raised one hand to my cheek, a gesture of such tender intimacy that my breath caught. When he leaned forward to kiss me, it felt like the most natural progression imaginable, the culmination of understanding and connection building over weeks of shared secrets and honest conversation. The kiss was gentle, almost tentative at first, then deepening as decades of experience replaced youthful uncertainty. When we finally parted, I found myself smiling despite the crisis that had brought me here. "Well," I said softly, "that certainly complicates the journalist's investigation." Robert laughed, the tension in his face easing. "Martha Collins, your remarkable ability to find humor in difficult situations is one of the many reasons I'm falling in love with you." The declaration hung in the air between us, honest and unhurried. At our age, such admissions carried different weight, less dramatic passion, more considered certainty. "I'm rather fond of you as well, Robert Wilson," I replied, the understatement deliberate and mutually understood. Fraudulent blindness and all. His smile widened at that, but quickly sobered as reality reasserted itself. "We need to decide how to handle this situation. If Reeves publishes his article, then we face it together," I finished for him, "whatever consequences come." Late that evening, as James drove me home, I found myself contemplating the extraordinary turn my life had taken since that moment at the bus stop. In just over a month, I had gone from a widow fighting for independence from her well-meaning son to a woman entangled in a billionaire's elaborate deception and now facing potential public scrutiny. Yet despite these complications, or perhaps because of them, I felt more engaged with life than I had in years. The woman who had once planned her days around book club meetings and arthritis management now navigated dual realities and contemplated public scandals with a strange exhilaration. Daniel was waiting outside my apartment building when we arrived, his expression a mixture of concern and indignation. "You left dinner to meet him, didn't you?" he demanded as I stepped from the car. "Mom, what's really going on between you and Wilson?" I sighed, too emotionally drained from the evening's developments to manufacture convenient excuses. "It's complicated, Daniel, and yes, we're more than casual acquaintances. Are you—" He struggled to formulate the question. "Romantically involved with this man?" The directness of his inquiry, asked while standing on a public sidewalk, struck me as both inappropriate and somehow liberating. The old Martha Collins might have deflected or softened the truth to spare her son's discomfort. The woman I was becoming decided on honesty. "Yes," I replied simply. "We are." Daniel's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and finally a peculiar resignation. "I don't understand this at all," he admitted. "But I suppose that doesn't matter, does it? Your understanding matters to me," I told him gently. "But your approval isn't required. I've spent years prioritizing your comfort and preferences, Daniel. Now I'm choosing my own happiness." As he drove away and I entered my quiet apartment, I felt an unexpected sense of peace, despite the threatening article, the complicated relationship, and my son's evident discomfort. At 67, I had finally realized that life's most meaningful chapters might still be unwritten, waiting for the courage to turn the page. The Sunday morning that Victor Reeves's article was published dawned with deceptive tranquility. I woke early, made coffee, and opened the digital edition of the magazine on my tablet with trepidation. The feature appeared prominently on the homepage. The curious case of Robert Wilson's selective blindness, philanthropy, privacy, or fraud. The piece was more damning than the draft we'd seen. Reeves had added recent photographs from the botanical garden, including one of me guiding Robert past a sculpture installation. Though my face wasn't clearly visible, the caption speculated about the mystery woman increasingly seen in Wilson's company, and questioned whether she was complicit in maintaining his facade. My phone rang before I'd finished reading. It was Sophia, her voice tightly controlled. "Have you seen it?" "I'm reading it now," I confirmed. "It's worse than the draft. The phones are already ringing. Business associates, foundation partners, journalists looking for comments." She paused, her professional composure momentarily slipping. "This could destroy everything we've built, Martha." The use of my first name, rather than the formal Mrs. Collins she typically employed, marked the gravity of the situation. Before I could respond, she continued, "Father wants you at the house. We're having an emergency strategy meeting in 30 minutes. Can you come?" "Of course," I said, already moving toward my bedroom to dress. "I'll be there as quickly as possible." James arrived in record time, his usual impassive expression replaced by grim efficiency as he navigated morning traffic. At the mansion, security was visibly enhanced. Additional guards at the gate, others patrolling the grounds. The media had already gathered at the perimeter, cameras and microphones at the ready. Inside, the atmosphere was that of a war room. Robert sat at the head of his study's conference table, surrounded by legal advisors, public relations specialists, and Sophia, who paced while speaking rapidly into her phone. When he saw me, Robert rose immediately, crossing the room to greet me with unexpected public affection, taking both my hands in his. "I'm sorry to drag you into this," he said quietly. "I was already in it," I reminded him. "The moment I recognized your secret." Sophia ended her call and addressed the assembled team. "The foundation board is requesting an emergency meeting. Our major corporate partners want statements clarifying the situation. The medical privacy angle is buying us some time, but eventually we'll need to respond definitively." A distinguished man I recognized as Robert's lead attorney cleared his throat. "Mr. Wilson, we've discussed this. From a legal standpoint, maintaining the fiction is increasingly untenable. If you were to acknowledge a partial recovery from your condition—" "A convenient miracle," Robert interrupted, his tone sardonic. "Suddenly regaining partial sight after 15 years, just as I'm accused of faking blindness? It would be more credible than continued denial in the face of mounting evidence," the attorney insisted. I observed the debate silently, understanding the complex implications of each option. Robert had spent 15 years constructing this identity, the dignified blind philanthropist overcoming personal adversity. Admitting deception would undermine not only his personal credibility, but potentially the foundation's work, the company's stability, and the privacy that had become so precious to him. After an hour of increasingly circular discussion, Robert raised his hand for silence. "I need to speak with Martha alone," he announced. "Everyone else, take 30 minutes." The room emptied quickly, though Sophia lingered at the doorway with evident reluctance before finally following the others. When we were alone, Robert removed his dark glasses, a gesture that now carried profound intimacy between us, and rubbed his eyes wearily. 15 years of careful construction, undone in a single article, he observed without self-pity. "What would you do, Martha?" The direct question caught me off guard. "You're asking my advice?" "I'm asking what you would do in my position. You're the most ethically centered person I know, and you understand the situation from both inside and outside." I considered carefully before responding. "I think I would tell the truth, not because you've been caught, but because living behind a facade has taken more from you than it's given." He nodded slowly, considering my words. "The isolation was protective at first, then became a prison. I see that now." His eyes met mine directly. "Meeting you made that abundantly clear, how much life I've been missing by hiding. Then perhaps this article, troubling as it is, offers an opportunity," I suggested. "Not for a convenient partial recovery, but for honesty on your own terms." Robert's expression shifted as he absorbed this perspective. "A public admission of the deception? A public explanation of why a man who values privacy might take extraordinary measures to protect it," I clarified. "Not an apology for the deception, but an honest accounting of its purpose and effects." He fell silent, contemplating this approach. Finally, he asked, "Would you stand with me? Publicly? It would mean scrutiny, publicity, everything I've been avoiding, and now would be imposing on you as well." The question represented more than just this immediate crisis. It was an invitation to fully enter his world, to transition from private connection to public partnership. At 67, I was being asked to step into a spotlight I'd never sought or imagined. "Yes," I said simply, "I would." When the team reassembled, Robert outlined his decision with the clarity and authority that had built his business empire. Not a carefully crafted partial truth as his advisors had suggested, but a complete narrative. His growing discomfort with fame and scrutiny, the strategic decision to use perceived disability as a shield, the years of living behind a carefully maintained facade. "We'll frame it as a personal statement," the public relations director suggested, already adapting to this unexpected approach. "Emphasize your contributions to accessibility and vision research as genuine commitments that grew from your experience. And address the foundation's future directly," Sophia added, her initial shock giving way to tactical planning. "Acknowledge the complex ethical questions while reaffirming our mission." By evening, the statement was prepared, a press conference scheduled for the following morning. As the team dispersed to implement the strategy, Robert and I found ourselves alone in his garden, the same spot where he had first revealed his secret to me. "Are you certain about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we step into that press conference together, your life changes irrevocably. The privacy you've valued, the quiet existence you've created, it will be compromised." I considered his warning seriously. The comfortable anonymity of my retirement would indeed be sacrificed. I would become a character in the public narrative of Robert Wilson's deception and redemption, subject to speculation and judgment from strangers. "At our age," I replied finally, "how many opportunities do we have for genuine reinvention? For adventures we never anticipated?" I took his hand, the gesture now familiar and grounding. "Besides, I've spent decades being defined primarily as someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's teacher. Perhaps being defined as the woman who saw through a billionaire's deception isn't such a terrible final chapter." His laugh was warm with affection and relief. "Not a final chapter, Martha. A new beginning." The press conference the next morning unfolded with the controlled drama of a well-directed play. Robert entered without his dark glasses or white cane, his vision clearly intact as he surveyed the assembled journalists. I stood slightly behind him, alongside Sophia, a visible declaration of solidarity. "For 15 years, he began, his voice steady and clear, "I have maintained a fiction about my visual impairment, Today, I am here to acknowledge that deception and explain, though not excuse, my reasons for it. The subsequent media frenzy was exactly as predicted, equal parts outrage, fascination, and analysis. Ethicists debated the morality of his deception. Business publications calculated potential impacts on his companies, and tabloids naturally focused on me, the mystery woman who inspired Robert Wilson's confession. Through it all, we maintained the united front established at the press conference. The Foundation's work continued, its mission reaffirmed through new initiatives specifically addressing transparency and ethical governance. Sophia, after her initial resistance, proved remarkably adaptable, leveraging the situation to highlight her leadership during this transition. Daniel, predictably, was horrified by my sudden public visibility. "You're in the tabloids, Mom," he lamented during a tense Sunday dinner. "People at work are asking if you're really dating a billionaire who faked being blind." "And what do you tell them?" I asked, genuinely curious. He sighed, resignation gradually replacing dismay. "That my mother has always been extraordinarily perceptive, and that she appears to be happy." 6 months after Victor Reeves's explosive article, the scandal had largely subsided, replaced by newer, more shocking revelations about other public figures. Robert and I had established a new normal, dividing our time between his mansion and my apartment, which I kept as a private refuge, maintaining my independence even as our lives became increasingly intertwined. On the anniversary of our first meeting at the bus stop, Robert suggested a return to that location. James drove us there, parking discreetly across the street. "1 year ago," Robert reflected, "you were abandoned here without resources, and I was imprisoned in a deception of my own making. And now?" I prompted, enjoying the symmetry of returning to where our story began. "Now we're both free, in ways neither of us anticipated." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Which brings me to a question I never imagined asking at this stage of life. Inside the box was a sapphire ring, elegant in its simplicity. "Martha Collins," he said formally, "would you consider marriage to a reformed fraud who has never seen more clearly than when he met you?" I laughed at his characteristically honest self-deprecation. "I would," I replied, allowing him to slip the ring onto my finger. "Though I insist my son walk me down the aisle, however much he struggles to understand us." As we sat together at the bus stop where everything had changed, I thought about the extraordinary journey from that first encounter. The abandoned mother, the seemingly blind gentleman, and a whispered suggestion that led to revelations neither of us could have predicted. "Your son will regret leaving you," Robert had said that day. He had been right, though not in the way either of us expected. Daniel's thoughtless abandonment had opened the door to transformation, not just for me, but for Robert, and ultimately for Daniel himself, who was slowly learning to see his mother as a woman, with her own story still unfolding. Sometimes the most significant journeys begin at the most ordinary places, like a suburban bus stop where a discarded woman and a man hiding in plain sight discovered that being truly seen, with all our complexities and contradictions, is perhaps the greatest freedom of all.
Chuyện hôm nay, mình muốn dành thêm một chút thời gian để nói chuyện với bạn một cách thật chậm và thật lòng. Bởi vì những câu chuyện như thế này, nó sẽ không kết thúc khi video kết thúc. Nó ở lại, ở trong cách chúng ta suy nghĩ, ở trong cách chúng ta cảm nhận, và đôi khi ở trong cách chúng ta bắt đầu nhìn nhận nhau theo một cách khác. Câu chuyện hôm nay là về tình yêu, nhưng không chỉ là tình yêu đơn thuần. Đó là tình yêu phải đi qua khác biệt, đi qua những nghi ngờ, đi qua cả những rào cản mà thế giới đôi khi vô tình tạo ra. Và có lẽ chính vì vậy nó trở nên đặc biệt. Bởi vì nó không hoàn hảo, không dễ dàng, nhưng lại rất thật, theo một cách nào đó chạm đến những điều sâu bên trong mỗi chúng ta, mong muốn được kết nối, được thấu hiểu và được nhìn nhận đúng với con người mình. Và trước khi nói tiếp, mình cũng muốn chia sẻ một điều rất quan trọng. Mình biết rằng mình không phải là một người phụ nữ da đen, và mình cũng hiểu rằng những trải nghiệm, những cảm xúc, những câu chuyện đã truyền cảm hứng cho nội dung của kênh không phải là điều mình trực tiếp sống qua. Vì vậy, mình không kể những câu chuyện này với suy nghĩ rằng mình có thể đại diện cho họ. Mình kể vì mình tôn trọng. Mình kể vì mình tin rằng trong những câu chuyện đó có vẻ đẹp, có sức mạnh và có cả những giá trị xứng đáng được lan tỏa, ngay cả khi chúng ta đến từ những nền tảng khác nhau. Nhưng mình cũng hiểu với một số bạn, điều đó có thể khiến bạn cảm thấy không thoải mái. Và thật lòng mà nói, cảm giác đó là hoàn toàn hợp lý. Bởi vì những câu chuyện này không chỉ là giải trí, chúng gắn với lịch sử thật, những khó khăn thật, những cảm xúc thật. Nên mình luôn cố gắng không bao giờ tiếp cận chúng một cách hời hợt. Mọi thứ trên kênh này, dù là hư cấu, đều được xây dựng từ sự cẩn trọng, từ việc học hỏi, từ việc lắng nghe, từ việc cố gắng thấu hiểu. Dù mình biết rằng mình sẽ không bao giờ hiểu hết được tất cả mọi thứ. Và điều đó rất là quan trọng với mình, bởi vì mình không ở đây để nói thay ai cả. Mình cũng không ở đây để thay thế cho tiếng nói của bất kỳ ai. Mình ở đây như một người kể chuyện, một người tin rằng nếu câu chuyện được kể bằng sự tôn trọng và chân thành thì nó có thể tạo ra sự kết nối thay vì chia rẽ. Và điều đó thực sự có ý nghĩa với mình. Mình cũng muốn bạn biết rằng mình luôn học hỏi. Mỗi bình luận, mỗi góc nhìn, mỗi phản hồi mình đều đọc, đều suy nghĩ và cố gắng cải thiện. Vì vậy nếu có điều gì mình làm chưa tốt, mình luôn sẵn sàng lắng nghe. Không phải để tranh luận, không phải để bảo vệ cái tôi, mà là để hiểu hơn và làm tốt hơn. Bởi vì cuối cùng, kênh này không phải là chỉ về mình. Nó là về những gì chúng ta có thể cùng cảm nhận được. Là về một không gian nơi tình yêu không bị giới hạn bởi màu da, bởi định kiến hay bởi những khuôn mẫu mà xã hội đặt ra. Là về việc cho thấy rằng sự kết nối, một sự kết nối thực sự có thể tồn tại ngay cả trong những hoàn cảnh mà người ta nghĩ là không thể. Và có lẽ thế giới này cần nhiều điều đó hơn nữa, nhiều sự thấu hiểu hơn, nhiều sự đồng cảm hơn, nhiều sự cởi mở hơn để nhìn nhau như những con người trước khi nhìn vào sự khác biệt. Vì vậy, khi bạn xem xong video này, mình không chỉ muốn bạn nhớ câu chuyện, mình muốn bạn nhớ cảm giác mà nó mang lại, những khoảnh khắc khiến bạn dừng lại, những khoảnh khắc khiến bạn suy nghĩ, bởi vì chính những điều đó mới thực sự có ý nghĩa. Nó nhắc chúng ta rằng dù chúng ta khác nhau về xuất phát điểm, về văn hóa, về trải nghiệm, chúng ta vẫn có thể kết nối với nhau theo những cách vượt qua tất cả những điều đó. Và đó là một điều rất mạnh mẽ. Nếu câu chuyện này đã chạm đến bạn, dù chỉ một chút thôi, thì cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều vì đã ở lại đây với mình. Cảm ơn các bạn vì đã lắng nghe, đã cảm nhận và đã là một phần của không gian này. Và mình hy vọng các bạn sẽ tiếp tục đồng hành cùng mình trong những câu chuyện tiếp theo. Những câu chuyện về tình yêu, về sự can đảm và về sức mạnh của việc dám kết nối trong một thế giới đầy rào cản. Hẹn gặp lại các bạn ở những câu chuyện tiếp theo. Hãy giữ cho trái tim mình luôn rộng mở và đừng bao giờ đánh giá thấp sức mạnh của một tình yêu dám vượt qua mọi giới hạn. Bye!